Close your eyes now and let me tell you about something strange that happens to your body. Something you have experienced countless times without ever truly understanding why. A phenomenon so familiar that you barely notice it anymore, yet so mysterious that scientists are still unraveling its secrets. This is the story of why we get goosebumps, those tiny bumps that rise on your skin when you're cold, when you're frightened, when you hear a piece of music so beautiful it seems to touch your soul. It is a story that reaches back millions of years, to ancestors covered in thick fur, to a time when raising the hairs on your body could save your life. And it is a story that reveals something profound about the connection between your body and your emotions, about the ancient systems that still operate within you, about the ghost of the furry creature you once were. If you enjoy these sleep stories, take a moment to leave a comment below telling me where you are watching from tonight and what topic you would like me to cover next. And if this story helps you drift off while learning something profound about human history, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might enjoy it. Now, let me take you on a journey beneath your skin to understand the tiny muscles and ancient instincts that create one of the most common yet least understood experiences of being human. You have felt goosebumps many times in your life. Perhaps you felt them this very day. A chill ran through you, and suddenly your skin transformed, becoming rough and bumpy, covered in tiny raised points. Or perhaps you heard a song that moved you deeply, and the same thing happened, your skin prickling as if touched by something invisible. Or perhaps you felt fear, real fear, and your skin responded before your conscious mind had time to process what was happening. These moments are so ordinary that we rarely stop to wonder about them. Goosebumps come and go, a minor curiosity, a brief sensation that passes and is forgotten. But if you pause to consider them, truly consider them, you realize how strange they are. Why would your skin do this? What possible purpose could those tiny bumps serve? And why do they appear in response to such different stimuli, to cold and fear and beauty and awe? The answers to these questions take us deep into human evolution, into the biology of skin and hair, into the neuroscience of emotion, and into the philosophical question of what it means to be a creature with a body that remembers things the mind has forgotten. Let me begin with what goosebumps actually are, with the physical mechanism that creates those familiar bumps on your skin. Beneath the surface of your skin, at the base of every hair follicle, there is a tiny muscle called the erector pili. This muscle is incredibly small, invisible to the naked eye, just a bundle of smooth muscle fibers attached to the hair follicle on one end and to the surrounding skin on the other. You have millions of these tiny muscles, one for each of the millions of hair follicles that cover your body. When the erector pili muscle contracts, it pulls on the hair follicle, causing the hair to stand upright. At the same time, the contraction pulls on the surrounding skin, creating a small bump at the base of the hair. This is a goosebump. It is simply the visible result of millions of tiny muscles contracting simultaneously, pulling millions of hairs erect and creating millions of tiny bumps across your skin. The name goosebumps comes from the resemblance to the skin of a plucked goose, which has a similar bumpy texture where the feathers have been removed. Other names for this phenomenon include gooseflesh, goose pimples, and the more technical term piloerection, which literally means hair standing up. In some languages, the phenomenon is named after other birds, like chicken skin in Spanish, or duck bumps in German. The universal association with bird skin reflects how recognizable and distinctive this texture is. The erector pili muscles are not under your conscious control. You cannot decide to give yourself goosebumps, just as you cannot decide to make your heart beat faster or your pupils dilate. These muscles are controlled by the autonomic nervous system, the part of your nervous system that manages automatic functions without conscious input. Specifically, goosebumps are triggered by the sympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for the fight or flight response. This connection to the sympathetic nervous system is crucial for understanding why goosebumps occur when they do. The same system that prepares your body to face danger, that increases your heart rate and sharpens your senses and floods your bloodstream with adrenaline, also triggers the contraction of your erector pili muscles. Goosebumps are part of a coordinated response to certain stimuli, a package of physiological changes that your body produces automatically. But why? Why would making your hair stand up be part of the fight or flight response? Why would this be useful in the face of danger? The answer lies in your ancestors, in creatures who lived millions of years ago, in a time when humans were covered in thick fur. Let me take you back to that time, to understand why the erector pili muscles evolved and what purpose they originally served. Your ancestors were furry. All mammals evolved from furry ancestors, and for most of mammalian history, a thick coat of fur was essential for survival. Fur provides insulation, keeping the body warm in cold environments. Fur provides protection, shielding the skin from sun, wind, rain, and minor injuries. Fur can serve as camouflage, helping animals hide from predators or sneak up on prey. For millions of years, fur was one of the defining characteristics of mammals, and your ancestors had plenty of it. In a furry animal, the erector pili muscles serve clear and important functions. When the muscles contract and the fur stands erect, two things happen that can mean the difference between life and death. First, erect fur provides better insulation. When fur lies flat against the skin, it traps a thin layer of air between the hairs. When fur stands upright, it traps a much thicker layer of air, creating a more effective insulating barrier. This is the same principle that makes a fluffy down jacket warmer than a thin fleece. More air trapped between fibers means better insulation. For a furry animal in a cold environment, raising the fur is an immediate way to increase warmth, a rapid response to dropping temperatures that requires no conscious effort. This is why you get goosebumps when you are cold. Your body is trying to raise your fur to trap more air and keep you warm. The problem, of course, is that you no longer have fur. Humans lost most of their body hair over the course of evolution, leaving only the sparse, fine hairs that cover most of our skin. These hairs are too thin and too short to provide any meaningful insulation, even when they stand erect. The erector pili muscles still contract, the hairs still rise, the goosebumps still appear, but the warming effect that this response was designed to produce no longer occurs. Goosebumps from cold are a vestige, an evolutionary leftover from a time when they served a real purpose. Your body still produces this response because the genetic instructions for it have been passed down through countless generations. But the response no longer does what it was originally designed to do. You get goosebumps when you are cold, but you do not get warmer as a result, at least not from the goosebumps themselves. The second function of erect fur is to make an animal appear larger and more threatening. When a cat is frightened or aggressive, its fur stands on end, making it look bigger and more formidable. The same is true for dogs, bears, wolves, and countless other mammals. Raised fur is a visual signal, a warning to potential predators or rivals that this animal is not to be trifled with. A small animal with raised fur looks bigger than the same animal with flat fur, and in the animal kingdom, size matters. This is why you get goosebumps when you're frightened. Your body is trying to raise your fur to make you look larger and more threatening. Again, this would have worked for your furry ancestors, who could puff up their coats and appear significantly larger. But for a mostly hairless human, the effect is negligible. Your tiny hairs stand up, your skin gets bumpy, but you do not look any larger or more threatening. The response is a ghost of its former self, a reflex that has lost its function but not its triggering mechanism. Understanding goosebumps as an evolutionary vestige explains the two classic triggers, cold and fear. Both triggers would have activated the fur-raising response in our furry ancestors, and both triggers still activate the response in us, even though the response no longer serves its original purpose. But this explanation leaves a mystery. Why do we get goosebumps from music? Why do we get goosebumps from seeing something beautiful, from hearing a moving speech, from experiencing awe or wonder? These emotional goosebumps, sometimes called aesthetic chills or frissons, are common human experiences, yet they do not seem to fit the evolutionary explanation. What does music have to do with warmth or appearing larger? Let me explore this mystery, because it takes us into fascinating territory at the intersection of biology, psychology, and the philosophy of emotion. Emotional goosebumps are real. Scientists have studied them, measured them, documented their occurrence in controlled laboratory settings. When people listen to certain kinds of music, when they watch certain kinds of films, when they experience certain kinds of moments, their skin responds with goosebumps just as reliably as it does to cold. The erector pili muscles contract, the hairs stand up, the bumps appear. The same physical mechanism that produces goosebumps from cold produces goosebumps from beauty. Not everyone experiences emotional goosebumps with the same frequency or intensity. Some people get them often, triggered by many different stimuli. Others rarely or never experience them. Studies suggest that people who are more open to experience a personality trait characterized by curiosity, creativity, and appreciation for beauty, are more likely to experience emotional goosebumps. There may also be genetic components that affect how easily the response is triggered. The music most likely to trigger goosebumps tends to have certain characteristics. Sudden changes in volume or texture, unexpected harmonies, the entrance of a new voice or instrument, moments of tension followed by resolution, all of these can trigger the response. The goosebumps often come at specific moments in a piece of music, moments that listeners can predict and anticipate once they know the music well. The response seems to be related to expectation and surprise, to the brain's prediction of what will come next and the emotional impact when those predictions are confirmed or violated. But why? Why would the brain trigger a fur-raising response to music? Music did not exist in the evolutionary environment where our responses were shaped. Our ancestors on the African savanna were not listening to symphonies or rock ballads. How could the goosebump response have become connected to musical experience? Several theories have been proposed to explain emotional goosebumps, and none of them is fully satisfactory, but together they paint a picture of a phenomenon that is more complex and more interesting than a simple evolutionary vestige. One theory is that emotional goosebumps are a form of social bonding. The experience of collective emotion, of being moved together by music or ritual or spectacle, may have played an important role in human evolution. Humans are social creatures, and our survival has always depended on cooperation within groups. Experiences that create a sense of shared emotion, of being part of something larger than oneself, may have helped to bind groups together, increasing their chances of survival. In this view, emotional goosebumps are a signal of this social emotional experience. When you get goosebumps from music at a concert, surrounded by others who are similarly moved, your body is responding to the social significance of the moment. The goosebumps are not about warmth or threat display, but about connection, about being part of a collective emotional experience. Another theory connects emotional goosebumps to the fight or flight response more directly. The sympathetic nervous system, which triggers goosebumps, is activated by any strong emotional arousal, not just fear. The chills you feel from beautiful music may be a low-level activation of this arousal system, a response to emotional intensity that happens to trigger the goosebump reflex along with it. In this view, emotional goosebumps are essentially a side effect. The brain cannot easily distinguish between different types of emotional intensity, so the same arousal system gets activated whether you're frightened by a predator or moved by a piece of music. The goosebumps come along for the ride, triggered by the arousal even though they serve no function in the musical context. A third theory suggests that emotional goosebumps are related to temperature regulation in a more subtle way. Strong emotions can affect body temperature, and the perception of cold can be influenced by emotional state. Perhaps the brain interprets certain emotional experiences as physically chilling, triggering the goosebump response as if the body were actually cold. This might explain why we describe emotionally moving experiences as chilling or spine-tingling. The language suggests a connection between emotional and physical coldness, a connection that may be more than metaphorical. When music sends chills down your spine, your brain may be responding as if you were actually experiencing a temperature drop. A fourth theory proposes that emotional goosebumps are a form of self-communication, a signal from your body to your consciousness that something important is happening. The physical sensation of goosebumps draws your attention, makes you more aware of the moment, heightens your engagement with whatever is causing the response. In this view, goosebumps are not a vestige or a side effect, but a functional response that helps you notice and remember significant experiences. The truth is probably some combination of these theories, or perhaps something else entirely that we have not yet discovered. Emotional goosebumps remain one of the more puzzling aspects of human physiology, a phenomenon that everyone recognizes but no one fully understands. What we do know is that the capacity for emotional goosebumps is distinctly human, or at least distinctly pronounced in humans. Other animals get goosebumps from cold and fear, but we have no evidence that they experience aesthetic chills from music or beauty. This uniquely human dimension of the goosebump response suggests that it may be connected to distinctly human capacities, our ability to create and appreciate art, our complex emotional lives, our capacity for experiences of awe and transcendence. Let me now tell you about the neuroscience of goosebumps, about what happens in your brain when those tiny muscles contract. The trigger for goosebumps begins in the brain, specifically in areas associated with emotion and arousal. When you perceive something that triggers the response, whether it is a drop in temperature, a frightening stimulus, or a moving piece of music, this information is processed by emotional centers in the brain, including the amygdala and the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is particularly important for temperature-related goosebumps. This small region at the base of the brain serves as the body's thermostat, monitoring temperature and triggering responses to keep the body within a healthy range. When the hypothalamus detects that the body's getting too cold, it initiates a series of responses designed to conserve and generate heat. These responses include shivering, constricting blood vessels near the skin, and yes, contracting the erector pili muscles to raise the fur or what remains of it. For emotional goosebumps, the pathway is less well understood, but it involves the sympathetic nervous system and the release of certain neurotransmitters and hormones. Adrenaline, also known as epinephrine, plays a role, as do other molecules involved in the stress response. The same chemical signals that prepare your body to fight or flee also trigger the contraction of your erector pili muscles. Brain imaging studies have shown that when people experience emotional goosebumps, there is increased activity in several brain regions associated with reward and emotion. The dopamine system, which is involved in pleasure and motivation, seems to be activated during these experiences. This suggests that emotional goosebumps are not just a reflexive response, but are connected to the brain's reward circuitry, to the systems that make experiences feel meaningful and pleasurable. There is also evidence that goosebumps are associated with the release of endorphins, the body's natural painkillers and mood elevators. This might explain why the experience of goosebumps from music or beauty often feels pleasurable, even though the physical sensation is similar to goosebumps from cold, which is usually unpleasant. The context and the accompanying brain chemistry make all the difference. The autonomic nervous system, which controls goosebumps, operates below the level of consciousness. You cannot will yourself to get goosebumps, and you cannot prevent them through conscious effort. This automatic nature is part of what makes goosebumps so interesting. They are a window into processes that normally operate invisibly, a visible sign of the body's hidden operations. Let me now take you on a journey through the animal kingdom to see how goosebumps work in other species and what this tells us about our own experience. Almost all mammals have erector pili muscles and the ability to raise their fur. The function is universal: thermal regulation and threat display. But the specifics vary widely depending on the species' lifestyle and environment. Consider the porcupine, whose quills are modified hairs. When a porcupine feels threatened, it raises its quills using erector pili muscles, creating a defensive barrier of sharp spines that can injure any predator foolish enough to attack. This is the threat display function taken to an extreme, where raising the hairs is not just about looking bigger, but about becoming genuinely dangerous. Consider the cat, whose fur can fluff up dramatically when the animal is frightened or aggressive. A frightened cat with raised fur looks significantly larger than a calm cat with flat fur. This visual transformation can deter predators or intimidate rivals, making the response genuinely useful. Cats also raise their fur when cold, demonstrating the dual function that characterizes the response in most mammals. Consider the polar bear, whose dense fur provides crucial insulation in the Arctic environment. Polar bears can raise their fur to trap more air and increase warmth, a response that is highly functional in their frigid habitat. For a polar bear, Goosebumps equivalent responses are not vestiges but active thermoregulation. Consider the sea otter, which has the densest fur of any mammal, with up to 1 million hairs per square inch. Sea otters rely entirely on their fur for insulation, as they lack the blubber that other marine mammals use. Keeping this fur properly arranged and trapping air is essential for their survival in cold Pacific waters. The erector pili muscles play a role in this, helping to maintain the air-trapping structure of the fur. Birds have a similar response, though it involves feathers rather than hair. When birds are cold, they fluff up their feathers to trap more air, creating a thicker insulating layer. When birds are threatened, they may also raise their feathers to appear larger. The mechanics are different from mammalian goosebumps, using different muscles, but the functions are the same, and the evolutionary logic is identical. What makes humans unusual is not that we have the goosebump response, but that it has become largely useless for its original purposes. Our sparse, fine body hair cannot provide meaningful insulation when raised, and raising it does not make us appear significantly larger or more threatening. We retain the response because evolution has not eliminated it, because it does no harm and there has been no pressure to lose it. or perhaps because the neural machinery that produces it is entangled with other important functions that must be preserved. Some scientists have suggested that goosebumps may still serve a minor thermoregulatory function in humans. The contraction of the erector pili muscles may generate a tiny amount of heat, and the slight changes in skin texture may have minor effects on heat loss. But these effects, if they exist, are so small as to be negligible. For practical purposes, human goosebumps are a vestige, a reminder of our furry past rather than a functional response. Let me now explore the experience of goosebumps in more detail, the phenomenology of this familiar sensation. When goosebumps occur, you feel a distinctive sensation on your skin. It often begins in one area, perhaps the arms or the back of the neck, and spreads across the body in a wave. The sensation is difficult to describe precisely. A tingling, a prickling, a tightening of the skin. You may feel the hairs on your body standing up, though with fine body hair this sensation is subtle. The experience of goosebumps is often accompanied by other sensations. With cold-triggered goosebumps, you feel the chill that prompted the response, and often a desire to warm yourself, to seek shelter or put on more clothing. With fear-triggered goosebumps, you feel the fear itself, the racing heart, and the heightened alertness that characterize the fight-or-flight response. With emotional goosebumps, you feel the emotion that triggered them, whether it is awe, nostalgia, sadness, joy, or some complex mixture that defies simple naming. The physical sensation of goosebumps is similar across these different triggers, but the emotional colouring is entirely different. Cold goosebumps feel unpleasant, a signal of discomfort that motivates you to seek warmth. Fear goosebumps feel alarming, part of a broader state of heightened alertness and preparation for action. Emotional goosebumps often feel pleasurable, a physical manifestation of being deeply moved, a sign that something meaningful is happening. This difference in how goosebumps feel depending on context illustrates an important principle about the relationship between body and mind. The physical sensation is produced by the same mechanism in each case, yet the subjective experience is entirely different. The meaning of the sensation, its emotional tone, and its motivational significance depends on the context in which it occurs. Your brain interprets the same physical signal differently depending on what else is happening. Some people chase the experience of emotional goosebumps, seeking out music, films, or experiences that reliably trigger the response. There is a community of enthusiasts who share recommendations for goosebump-inducing content, who discuss the phenomenon and compare notes on what triggers it for them. For these people, emotional goosebumps are a valued experience, a sign of being fully alive and emotionally engaged. Others rarely or never experience emotional goosebumps and may be puzzled by descriptions of the phenomenon. The capacity for this response varies across individuals, and some people seem to lack it entirely. This variation may be genetic, or it may be related to personality traits, emotional sensitivity, or other factors. We do not fully understand why some people are more prone to emotional goosebumps than others. Let me now tell you about the cultural significance of goosebumps, about how different societies have understood and interpreted this phenomenon. Every culture has noticed goosebumps and given them a name. The names often reflect cultural interpretations of the phenomenon. The English goosebumps and gooseflesh reflect the visual resemblance to plucked bird skin. The French chair de poule, literally chicken flesh, makes the same comparison. The German Gänsehaut, goose skin, follows the same pattern. Other languages use different metaphors. In Japanese, the phenomenon is called torihada, bird skin, continuing the avian theme. In some languages, the terms relate to cold or fear rather than to animal comparisons. The diversity of names reflects both the universality of the phenomenon and the cultural creativity in describing it. In many cultures, goosebumps have been associated with supernatural experiences. The feeling of the hair standing up on the back of your neck, a classic goosebump experience, is often associated with sensing a ghostly presence or entering a haunted place. This association makes sense given the connection between goosebumps and fear. If the response evolved partly as a threat detector, it would naturally be triggered by anything perceived as potentially dangerous, including supernatural threats. Literature and film often use goosebumps as a marker of significant experiences. Characters get goosebumps when they encounter something frightening, beautiful, or meaningful. The phrase "sent chills down my spine" or "gave me goosebumps" is a cliché for describing powerful experiences. The physical response has become a metaphor for emotional intensity. The deliberate induction of goosebumps has appeared in various cultural practices. The manipulation of temperature and emotion in rituals, the use of music to create collective emotional experiences, the design of architecture to inspire awe, all of these can trigger goosebumps and have been used by cultures throughout history. The goosebump response may have played a role in religious and ceremonial experiences, providing a physical confirmation of the significance of the moment. Let me now explore the question of why humans lost their fur in the first place, because this history is essential for understanding why goosebumps have become a vestige rather than a function. Your ancestors, going back millions of years, were covered in fur like other apes. Chimpanzees and gorillas, our closest living relatives, are still furry, as were all the species in our lineage until relatively recently. But at some point in human evolution, perhaps around 2 million years ago, our ancestors began to lose their body hair, becoming the naked apes we are today. Why did this happen? The loss of fur seems counterintuitive. Fur is useful. It provides insulation, protection, and other benefits. Why would evolution favour a species that lacked this protective covering? The leading theory connects our hairlessness to our unique mode of temperature regulation: sweating. Humans are the sweatiest animals on the planet. We have more sweat glands than any other mammal, distributed across nearly our entire body surface. When we get hot, we sweat, and as the sweat evaporates, it cools our skin and prevents our body temperature from rising to dangerous levels. This sweating system is remarkably effective. It allowed our ancestors to be active in the hottest parts of the day when other animals had to rest in the shade. It allowed them to run long distances without overheating, pursuing prey until the prey collapsed from heat exhaustion. This persistence hunting may have been a crucial adaptation that allowed early humans to obtain meat, providing the nutrition necessary for our large, energy-hungry brains. But sweating only works if the sweat can evaporate, and a thick coat of fur would prevent this. Fur traps moisture against the skin, reducing evaporation and defeating the purpose of sweating. If our ancestors were to become effective sweaters, they had to lose their fur. This is probably why humans are hairless. We traded the insulating benefits of fur for the cooling benefits of sweating. The trade was worthwhile because the cooling benefits were more important for our survival strategy, which depended on being active during the heat of the day and travelling long distances. The loss of fur had many consequences. It made us dependent on fire, clothing, and shelter for warmth in cold environments. It changed the way we look, making us visually distinctive among the apes. It affected our social behaviour, as hairlessness required new ways of signalling status, health, and attractiveness. And it rendered the goosebump response largely useless, turning what had been a functional response into a vestige. But the goosebump response did not disappear entirely. The erector pili muscles are still there, still attached to each hair follicle, still capable of contracting when triggered. The neural pathways that control them are still intact, still responsive to cold and fear and emotion. The response persists, even though its original function is gone, because there has been no evolutionary pressure to eliminate it. Let me now discuss the connection between goosebumps and other vestigial responses, the remnants of our evolutionary past that still appear in our bodies and behaviours. Humans are full of vestiges, features that once served important functions but no longer do. The appendix, once thought to be entirely useless, may have played a role in digestion or immune function in our ancestors. Wisdom teeth, which often cause problems in modern humans, were useful when our ancestors had larger jaws and needed extra grinding surfaces. The palmaris longus muscle, which is absent in about 10% of people, once helped our ancestors grip branches while climbing. Goosebumps fit into this category of vestiges. They are a response that was once functional, but is no longer, a remnant of our furry past that persists because it causes no harm. Unlike the appendix, which can become inflamed and dangerous, goosebumps cause no problems. They are simply there, a curious quirk of human physiology, a reminder that our bodies carry the marks of our evolutionary history. Other vestigial responses are behavioural rather than physical. The startle response, the jump and tensing that occurs when you are surprised by a loud noise, was once useful for escaping predators but is now mostly an annoyance. The fear of heights, which makes many people uncomfortable even in perfectly safe situations, was adaptive when falling from a height would likely be fatal, but is excessive in a world of guardrails and safety harnesses. These responses, like goosebumps, persist because they were once useful, and because there has been no pressure to eliminate them. Understanding vestiges helps us understand how evolution works. Evolution does not design organisms from scratch. It modifies existing designs. Features that were useful in the past may become useless in the present, but they do not disappear immediately. They linger, sometimes for millions of years, as vestiges that reveal the history of the organism. Goosebumps, then, are a window into your evolutionary past. When you feel your skin prickle with goosebumps, you are experiencing a response that once helped your ancestors stay warm and appear threatening. You are feeling the ghost of their fur, the echo of a time when you were a different kind of creature, covered in hair, living in a different world. Let me now explore some of the stranger aspects of goosebumps, the unusual cases and curious facts that reveal the complexity of this phenomenon. Some people can give themselves goosebumps voluntarily. This is rare, as the response is normally controlled by the autonomic nervous system and cannot be consciously triggered. But a small percentage of people claim to be able to produce goosebumps at will, without any external trigger. Studies of these individuals suggest that they may have unusual control over their autonomic nervous system, or that they may be using mental techniques, like imagining a frightening or emotionally moving scenario to indirectly trigger the response. The ability to voluntarily produce goosebumps has been associated with other unusual abilities, like voluntary control of heart rate or body temperature. These abilities are rare but genuine, demonstrating that the boundary between voluntary and involuntary bodily functions is not as firm as we usually assume. With training or natural talent, some people can influence processes that are normally automatic. Goosebumps can occur in unusual places. Most people experience them on the arms, legs, and back, where hair follicles are dense and the erector pili muscles are well developed. But goosebumps can also occur on the face, the scalp, and even the genitals, anywhere there are hair follicles. The distribution varies between individuals, and some people have stronger responses in certain areas. Goosebumps can be asymmetric, occurring on one side of the body but not the other. This is unusual but documented. The reasons for asymmetric goosebumps are not well understood but may involve asymmetries in the nervous system or skin. Certain medical conditions can affect the goosebump response. Anhydrotic ectodermal dysplasia, a rare genetic condition, can result in the absence of hair follicles and thus the absence of goosebumps. Certain neurological conditions can affect the autonomic nervous system and alter the goosebump response. Some medications can trigger or suppress goosebumps as a side effect. Goosebumps can sometimes be a symptom of drug withdrawal. Opioid withdrawal in particular is famous for causing intense goosebumps, giving rise to the slang term cold turkey for quitting drugs abruptly. The goosebumps are part of the broader autonomic dysregulation that occurs during withdrawal as the nervous system adjusts to the absence of the drug. Let me now discuss the future of goosebump research, what scientists are still trying to understand about this phenomenon. Despite being a universal human experience, goosebumps are still not fully understood. Many questions remain open, and researchers continue to investigate. One area of active research is the neural basis of emotional goosebumps. What exactly happens in the brain when music or beauty triggers the response? How does the brain connect aesthetic experience to the physiological systems that produce goosebumps? Brain imaging studies are helping to answer these questions, but the picture is still incomplete. Another area of research concerns the individual differences in goosebump susceptibility. Why do some people get emotional goosebumps frequently, while others rarely or never experience them? Is this difference genetic, developmental, or related to personality and experience? Understanding these differences could shed light on the broader questions of emotional processing and aesthetic response. Researchers are also investigating whether goosebumps have any functions that we have not yet discovered. While the thermoregulatory and threat display functions are clearly vestigial in humans, could there be other purposes that the response serves? Some researchers have suggested that the movement of the erector pili muscles might play a role in skin health, helping to distribute oils or maintain the hair follicles. Others have proposed that the visible response might serve a social signaling function, allowing others to see when you are cold, frightened, or moved. The connection between goosebumps and emotion is also being studied for practical applications. Could the goosebump response be used as a measure of emotional engagement, a way of objectively assessing how moved someone is by a piece of music or a work of art? Devices that detect goosebumps could potentially be used in market research, entertainment, or therapy. This is speculative but intriguing. Let me now bring this exploration back to you, lying here in the darkness, perhaps feeling a slight chill, perhaps remembering a piece of music that gave you goosebumps, perhaps simply curious about your own body. Your skin is a remarkable organ. It is the largest organ in your body, covering about 20 square feet in the average adult. It is your interface with the world, sensing touch, temperature, pain, and pressure. It protects you from the environment, keeping harmful substances out and essential substances in, and it is studded with millions of tiny structures, hair follicles with their erector pili muscles, capable of producing that familiar sensation of goosebumps. Right now, as you lie here, your erector pili muscles are relaxed, your skin is smooth, your hair's lying flat. But if you felt a chill, if you heard a frightening noise, if you began to listen to music that moves you deeply, those tiny muscles would contract, those hairs would rise, and goosebumps would spread across your skin. This response connects you to your ancestors. It is a link to creatures who lived millions of years ago, who had thick fur and relied on raising it to stay warm and appear threatening. When you get goosebumps, you're experiencing a response that they experienced, using muscles that they used, feeling a sensation that they felt. You are connected to them through the flesh. This response also connects you to other humans. Every person on Earth has the same muscles, the same response, the same experience of goosebumps. When you see a film that gives you goosebumps, and you see another person in the theatre react the same way, you are sharing an experience that is both deeply personal and universally human. Goosebumps are something we all have in common, and this response connects you to the mystery of your own body, to the countless automatic processes that occur beneath your skin without your knowledge or control. Your heart beats, your lungs breathe, your stomach digests, and your erector pili muscles stand ready to contract at the slightest trigger. These processes are you, in a sense, even though you do not consciously control them. They are part of what it means to have a body. Let me now tell you about what scientists have learned about the connection between goosebumps and memory. There is evidence that goosebumps are associated with enhanced memory formation. When you experience goosebumps during an event, you are more likely to remember that event later. The emotional arousal that triggers goosebumps also seems to enhance the encoding of memories, making the experience more vivid and more lasting. This makes evolutionary sense. If goosebumps are triggered by significant events that are threatening or meaningful, then it would be advantageous to remember those events clearly. The same arousal that produces goosebumps also signals to the brain that this experience should be recorded and retained. This might explain why certain memories are so vivid, why certain experiences stay with us for years while others fade quickly. The experiences that give us goosebumps, the moments of fear, beauty, awe, and emotion, are also the experiences that become lasting memories. The goosebumps are a marker of significance, both in the moment and in memory. Some researchers have suggested using goosebumps as a tool for understanding memory. By tracking when people experience goosebumps during an event, we might be able to predict which parts of the event they will remember best. This could have applications in education, entertainment, and therapy, helping to design experiences that are memorable and impactful. Let me tell you about the connection between goosebumps and music in more detail, because this relationship has been particularly well studied. Music is one of the most reliable triggers for emotional goosebumps. In studies, up to 90% of people report having experienced goosebumps from music at some point, making it perhaps the most common trigger for this response. The music most likely to trigger goosebumps tends to have certain structural features. Crescendos, where the music gradually builds in volume and intensity, are common triggers. The entrance of a new voice or instrument, particularly if unexpected, can trigger the response. Harmonic shifts, where the music moves to a new key or introduces unexpected chords, often produce goosebumps. Appoggiaturas, notes that clash slightly with the underlying harmony before resolving, are particularly effective. These structural features all share something in common. They involve a build-up of tension followed by release, or a violation of expectation followed by resolution. The brain is constantly predicting what will happen next in music, and goosebumps seem to occur when those predictions are powerfully confirmed or interestingly violated. The emotional impact comes from the relationship between what we expect and what actually happens. The lyrics of songs can also trigger goosebumps, particularly when they express something deeply meaningful or when they are delivered with emotional intensity. A powerful phrase, sung with conviction, can produce goosebumps even if the music itself is simple. Personal associations play a role as well. A song that is connected to a meaningful memory, a relationship, a period of life, may trigger goosebumps not because of its musical structure, but because of what it means to the listener. These associative goosebumps are highly individual, triggered by the listener's personal history rather than universal musical features. The study of musical goosebumps has implications for understanding both music and emotion. Music seems to have a direct line to our emotional systems, bypassing conscious analysis and triggering physical responses like goosebumps. Understanding how this works could shed light on the broader questions of what music is, why it affects us so powerfully, and why it seems to be a human universal. Let me now tell you about goosebumps in the context of fear and horror, because this connection reveals something about how our bodies respond to perceived threats. Horror films and stories are designed to trigger fear, and goosebumps are a reliable marker of success. When you watch a horror movie and feel the hairs rise on the back of your neck, the filmmakers have achieved their goal. They have activated your threat response, your ancient fight-or-flight system, using nothing but images and sounds. This is remarkable when you think about it. You are sitting safely in your living room or a theatre. There is no actual threat. Your conscious mind knows perfectly well that the monster on the screen cannot hurt you, and yet your body responds as if the threat were real, producing goosebumps and increased heart rate and all the other signs of fear. This disconnect between conscious knowledge and bodily response reflects the architecture of our brains. The emotional systems that produce fear responses evolved long before the rational systems that evaluate evidence and assess probability. The emotional systems are fast and automatic, responding to anything that looks like a threat. The rational systems are slower and more deliberate, capable of overriding the emotional response but often lagging behind. When you watch a horror movie, your emotional systems see a threat and respond accordingly. Your rational systems know there is no real threat but cannot prevent the initial emotional response. The goosebumps you feel are the result of this conflict, your body responding to a perceived threat that your mind knows is not real. This phenomenon, sometimes called the paradox of fiction, has been much discussed by philosophers and psychologists. How can we have real emotional responses to things we know are not real? The goosebump response demonstrates that our bodies do not make sharp distinctions between real and fictional threats. The threat cues that activate our fear response do not come with labels indicating whether they are real. A scary image triggers the same response whether it represents a real danger or a fictional one. Let me tell you about the experience of goosebumps during moments of awe, because this is one of the most profound triggers for the response. Awe is a complex emotion, experienced when we encounter something vast and beyond our current understanding. It can be triggered by natural phenomena, like standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon or watching the aurora borealis. It can be triggered by human achievements, like seeing the pyramids or hearing a symphony. It can be triggered by religious or spiritual experiences, by the sense of encountering something greater than oneself, or often produces goosebumps, the feeling of the sublime, of being in the presence of something immensely powerful or beautiful, is frequently accompanied by the physical sensation of the hair standing up. This connection between awe and goosebumps is so common that the physical response has become part of how we recognize and describe the emotional experience. Some researchers believe that awe evolved as a response to powerful leaders or dangerous natural phenomena, helping our ancestors recognize and respond appropriately to things beyond their control. In this view, goosebumps during awe are related to the threat response, to the recognition of something powerful that demands respect or caution. Others see awe as more closely related to the experience of beauty and transcendence, to the human capacity for experiencing meaning and wonder. In this view, goosebumps during awe are related to the emotional goosebumps triggered by music and art, part of our response to experiences that move us deeply. Whatever the explanation, the connection between awe and goosebumps is real and common. When you stand before something vast and wonderful, when you feel small and the universe feels large, when you experience that particular mixture of fear and joy that characterizes awe, your body may respond with goosebumps, marking the moment as significant. The night grows deeper now, and it is time to bring this exploration to a close. Let me leave you with some final thoughts about goosebumps and what they reveal about being human. Goosebumps are a reminder that you have a body. In our modern world, we often live in our heads, focused on thoughts and ideas and screens, forgetting the physical organism that carries us through life. Goosebumps pull you back into your body, reminding you that you are a creature of flesh and skin, capable of physical responses to the world around you. Goosebumps are a reminder that you have a past. The response you feel is millions of years old, inherited from ancestors who lived very different lives than you do. When you get goosebumps, you're experiencing something they experienced, using biological machinery they developed. You are connected to them through your flesh. Goosebumps are a reminder that you have emotions. The response is triggered not just by physical stimuli like cold, but by emotional experiences like fear, beauty, and awe. Your body responds to your emotions, translating inner experience into physical sensation. The goosebumps you feel are evidence that your emotional life is real, embodied, tangible, and goosebumps are a reminder that there is still mystery. Despite all we know about physiology and evolution, there is still much about goosebumps that we do not understand. Why do we get them from music? Why do some people experience them more than others? What exactly is happening in the brain when those tiny muscles contract? These questions remain open, inviting curiosity and further investigation. As you lie here in the darkness, perhaps you can feel your skin, the vast organ that covers your body, dotted with millions of hair follicles, each with its tiny muscle waiting to contract. Right now, those muscles are relaxed, but they are ready, always ready to respond to cold or fear or beauty. Perhaps you will get goosebumps tonight. Perhaps a chill in the air will trigger the response, or a sound in the darkness, or a dream that moves you. If you do, you will be experiencing something ancient, something shared with all of humanity, something that connects you to your furry ancestors and to the long history of life on Earth. Sleep now, creature of flesh and sensation. Sleep with your skin smooth and your hairs at rest. Sleep knowing that your body carries the marks of your evolutionary past, that goosebumps are just one of many vestiges that remind you where you came from. Tomorrow you will wake, and your skin will greet the world, sensing temperature and touch and pressure, covered with hairs that can rise at a moment's notice. Tomorrow you may hear music that moves you, or see something that awes you, or feel a chill that sends goosebumps spreading across your arms. These experiences will connect you to your humanity, to your body, to the long history that made you what you are. But stay a while longer, for the night is deep and there is more to explore about this strange response that ripples across your skin. Let me tell you about the evolutionary timeline of goosebumps, about when and how this response first appeared in the history of life. Hair itself is an ancient feature, appearing in the earliest mammals over 200 million years ago. Before that, the ancestors of mammals had scales, like modern reptiles, but at some point in the Triassic period, a lineage of animals began to develop hair, perhaps first as a sensory organ, whisker-like projections that helped them navigate the darkness where they lived, or perhaps first as insulation, helping them maintain body temperature in a way their cold-blooded competitors could not. With hair came the muscles to control it. The erector pili muscles evolved alongside hair, allowing the early mammals to raise and lower their fur as needed. This was not just about thermoregulation. The ability to control the position of hair allowed for visual signaling, for threat displays, for communication with other members of the species. For over 200 million years, this system has been conserved in mammals. From the tiniest shrew to the largest whale, from the frigid Arctic to the tropical rainforest, mammals have retained their hair and the muscles that control it. The specifics have varied, with different species having different amounts and types of hair, but the basic system has remained the same. Humans are an exception, one of the few mammals to have lost most of their body hair. But even we have not lost the system entirely. We retain the hair follicles, the erector pili muscles, the neural pathways that control them. We are like a building that has been gutted but retains its facade, the outward appearance of the original structure even though the interior has been transformed. This evolutionary perspective helps explain why goosebumps feel so automatic, so involuntary, so beyond conscious control. The response is controlled by very ancient brain structures, systems that evolved long before the rational, conscious mind. These systems are fast and efficient, triggering goosebumps before you even have time to think about what is happening. They are also inflexible, responding to the same triggers in the same way, regardless of whether the response makes sense in the current context. When you get goosebumps from cold, your ancient brain is trying to help you, trying to raise your fur to keep you warm. The fact that you no longer have fur, that the response is useless, does not matter to these ancient systems. They do what they were designed to do, following programs that were written millions of years ago. Let me tell you more about the specific neural pathways that control goosebumps, about the journey from perception to muscle contraction. The process begins with sensory receptors, the specialized cells that detect changes in the environment. For cold-triggered goosebumps, the key receptors are thermoreceptors, cells in the skin that detect temperature changes. When these receptors detect a drop in temperature, they send electrical signals along sensory nerves to the spinal cord and brain. The signals travel to the hypothalamus, the brain's thermostat. The hypothalamus compares the incoming temperature information to its set point, the temperature it is trying to maintain. If the body is too cold, the hypothalamus initiates a series of responses designed to generate and conserve heat. One of these responses is the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, the branch of the autonomic nervous system responsible for fight or flight responses. The sympathetic system sends signals down through the spinal cord to the peripheral nerves that innervate the erector pili muscles. These signals cause the muscles to contract, raising the hairs and producing goosebumps. The entire process, from sensing cold to producing goosebumps, takes only a fraction of a second. It happens automatically, without any conscious involvement. By the time you notice the goosebumps on your skin, the neural processing that produced them is already complete. For emotional goosebumps, the pathway is different but overlaps significantly. The trigger is not a physical stimulus like cold, but an emotional experience like hearing moving music. The processing involves higher brain regions, including the auditory cortex, which processes the sound, and limbic structures like the amygdala, which processes emotional significance. When these higher regions detect something emotionally significant, they can activate the sympathetic nervous system just as a physical threat would. The same downstream pathway, from sympathetic neurons to erector pili muscles, produces the goosebumps. The difference is in how the sympathetic system is activated, not in what happens once it is activated. This shared pathway explains why emotional and physical goosebumps feel similar. The final common pathway, the contraction of the erector pili muscles, is the same regardless of what triggered it. What differs is the emotional context, the accompanying feelings, the meaning of the experience. Let me now explore the question of why goosebumps spread across the skin in waves, rather than appearing all at once. If you pay close attention to your goosebumps, you will notice that they often begin in one area and spread outward, like ripples on a pond. They might start on your arms and spread to your back, or start on your neck and spread down your spine. This wave-like pattern is characteristic of the response and reflects the underlying neural architecture. The nerves that control the erector pili muscles are organized in segments along the spinal cord. Each segment innervates a specific region of skin called a dermatome. When the sympathetic nervous system is activated, the signals travel down through these segments, activating them in sequence rather than all at once. The pattern of spread can vary depending on the trigger and the individual. Different people have different patterns of goosebump spread, and the same person may have different patterns in response to different stimuli. This variation reflects individual differences in neural wiring and sensitivity. The wave-like spread of goosebumps has an interesting perceptual effect. It makes the response feel more dramatic, more noticeable, than if the goosebumps simply appeared all at once. The sensation of something rippling across your skin is attention-getting, hard to ignore. This may be functional, ensuring that you notice the response and whatever triggered it. Let me tell you about the relationship between goosebumps and other skin responses, the ways in which your skin reacts to different stimuli. Your skin is a responsive organ, constantly adjusting to changes in the environment. Goosebumps are just one of many responses your skin can produce. Sweating is another important skin response, triggered by heat or emotional arousal. When you get hot, sweat glands in your skin produce sweat, which evaporates and cools the body. When you are nervous or excited, you may also sweat, particularly on your palms and forehead. This emotional sweating is controlled by the same sympathetic nervous system that controls goosebumps. Blushing is a skin response to embarrassment or other social emotions. When you blush, blood vessels in your face dilate, allowing more blood to flow near the surface and making your skin appear red. Blushing is an involuntary response, impossible to control consciously, and is unique to humans among the primates. Skin conductance, the ability of your skin to conduct electricity, changes with emotional arousal. When you are emotionally excited, your sweat glands become more active, increasing the electrical conductivity of your skin. This response is the basis for lie detector tests, which measure changes in skin conductance as an indicator of emotional arousal. All of these responses, including goosebumps, are controlled by the autonomic nervous system. They are automatic, involuntary, and responsive to both physical and emotional stimuli. Together, they make your skin a window into your inner state, a surface that reveals what is happening inside. Let me now explore the social dimensions of goosebumps, the ways in which this response connects us to each other. Goosebumps can be contagious. When you see someone else get goosebumps, or when someone describes an experience that gave them goosebumps, you may find yourself getting goosebumps too. This social transmission of the response suggests that goosebumps are not just a personal experience, but a shared one. This contagion effect may be related to mirror neurons, brain cells that fire both when we perform an action and when we see someone else perform the same action. Mirror neurons are thought to be important for empathy and social connection, helping us understand and share the experiences of others. If similar mechanisms apply to autonomic responses like goosebumps, it would explain why seeing someone else's goosebumps can trigger our own. The social dimension of goosebumps is particularly evident in collective experiences like concerts, religious services, and sporting events. When a crowd of people experiences something moving together, goosebumps can spread through the group, creating a shared physical experience that reinforces the emotional connection. These moments of collective goosebumps may play a role in social bonding, helping to create a sense of unity and shared experience. Some researchers have proposed that the visible nature of goosebumps serves a communicative function. When you get goosebumps, others can see that you are experiencing something significant. This visibility might help to signal emotional states, to share experiences, to build social connections. In this view, goosebumps are not just a vestigial response but an active form of social communication. Let me tell you about the role of goosebumps in literature and the arts, about how this physical response has been used as a marker of powerful experience. Writers have long used goosebumps as a way to describe intense experiences. When a character gets goosebumps in a novel, we understand that they are experiencing something significant, something that has affected them at a deep level. Goosebumps are a kind of shorthand for emotional intensity, a physical marker that tells the reader how to understand the moment. The horror genre in particular has embraced goosebumps as a measure of success. A good horror story should give the reader goosebumps, a great one should give them repeatedly. The R.L. Stein book series Goosebumps is named after this association, promising readers that the stories will produce this physical response. Musicians and composers have also been interested in goosebumps, seeking to understand what musical features produce the response. Some composers deliberately design their music to trigger goosebumps, using crescendos, sudden shifts, and emotional climaxes that reliably produce the response. The ability to give an audience goosebumps is seen as a mark of great music. Film directors use a combination of visual and auditory techniques to produce goosebumps. The scoring of a film, in particular, is often designed to produce emotional peaks that trigger the response. The combination of powerful images with powerful music can produce goosebumps more reliably than either alone. The arts, then, have developed a sophisticated understanding of goosebumps, using them as both a goal and a marker of success. The ability to produce goosebumps in an audience is valued, pursued, and refined. This cultural emphasis has made goosebumps a central part of how we experience and evaluate art. Let me now discuss the medical significance of goosebumps, what they can tell us about health and disease. In most cases, goosebumps are normal and harmless, a routine response to cold or emotion. But in some cases, they can be a sign of medical conditions or the effects of substances. As I mentioned earlier, opioid withdrawal produces intense goosebumps, giving rise to the term cold turkey. This occurs because opioids suppress the autonomic nervous system, and when the drugs are withdrawn, the system rebounds, producing exaggerated responses including goosebumps, sweating, and rapid heart rate. Other drugs can also trigger goosebumps. Stimulants like amphetamines and cocaine can produce piloerection as part of their sympathetic activation. Some psychedelic drugs produce goosebumps as part of their altered states of consciousness. The goosebumps in these cases are side effects, byproducts of the drug's effects on the nervous system. Certain neurological conditions can affect the goosebump response. Conditions that damage the autonomic nervous system may reduce or eliminate the ability to produce goosebumps. Conditions that produce abnormal sympathetic activation may cause goosebumps to occur inappropriately or excessively. Goosebumps can also be a symptom of seizures. Some types of seizures produce autonomic symptoms, including piloerection, as part of the seizure activity. If someone experiences unexplained goosebumps repeatedly, particularly if accompanied by other symptoms, it could be worth investigating for neurological causes. For most people, however, goosebumps are simply a normal part of how the body works. They come and go, triggered by cold and emotion, a routine aspect of having a body with millions of hair follicles and the muscles to control them. Let me tell you about the research methods used to study goosebumps, about how scientists investigate this phenomenon. Studying goosebumps presents challenges because the response is involuntary and somewhat unpredictable. Researchers cannot simply ask subjects to produce goosebumps on command. They must either use reliable triggers, like cold or emotional stimuli, or wait for goosebumps to occur naturally, and try to understand what triggered them. One common method is to expose subjects to cold and measure their goosebump response. This can be done by placing a cold object on the skin, by exposing subjects to cold air, or by immersing a limb in cold water. The goosebumps can be measured by visual inspection, by photography, or by sensors that detect the changes in skin texture. For emotional goosebumps, researchers typically use music as a trigger, since music reliably produces the response in many people. Subjects listen to music while researchers monitor their skin for goosebumps. The subjects may also report when they experience goosebumps, allowing researchers to match the subjective experience with the physical response. More advanced methods include skin conductance measurements, which detect the sympathetic activation that accompanies goosebumps even if the bumps themselves are not visible. Brain imaging techniques like fMRI can show what is happening in the brain when goosebumps occur, helping to map the neural pathways involved. Some researchers have developed wearable devices that can detect goosebumps automatically, allowing for continuous monitoring outside the laboratory. These devices could eventually allow for large-scale studies of when and why people get goosebumps in their daily lives. Let me now explore the philosophical questions raised by goosebumps, the deeper issues about body, mind, and experience that this phenomenon illuminates. Goosebumps illustrate the intimate connection between body and emotion. When you feel fear or awe or are moved by beauty, your body responds. This response is not something you choose or control, it happens automatically, as if your emotions were directly connected to your flesh. This connection challenges the idea of mind and body as separate, showing how deeply intertwined they are. Goosebumps also raise questions about the nature of emotion itself. If emotions produce physical responses like goosebumps, are emotions physical phenomena? Or are they mental phenomena that happen to have physical effects? The relationship between the subjective experience of emotion and the physical response of goosebumps is not fully understood. Some philosophers have argued that emotions are essentially physical, that what we call fear or joy or awe are really just patterns of bodily response. In this view, goosebumps are not a byproduct of emotion but part of what emotion is. You do not get goosebumps because you are moved. The goosebumps are part of being moved. Others have argued that emotions are primarily mental, experiences that happen in consciousness rather than in the body. In this view, goosebumps are a physical correlate of emotion, something that accompanies the mental experience but is not identical to it. You could, in principle, have the emotion without the goosebumps, or the goosebumps without the emotion. The truth is probably more complex than either view suggests. Emotions seem to involve both mental and physical components, neither reducible to the other. Goosebumps are part of the physical component, but they do not exhaust what emotion is. The subjective experience of being moved cannot be fully explained by the contraction of erector pili muscles. Let me tell you about the experience of people who have lost the ability to produce goosebumps, what this tells us about the significance of the response. Some people, due to medical conditions or injuries, cannot produce goosebumps. They may have lost the hair follicles, the muscles, or the neural pathways necessary for the response. For these individuals, cold and emotion do not produce the familiar rippling of the skin. Reports from these individuals suggest that the loss of goosebumps is not deeply distressing. They still feel cold, still feel fear, still can be moved by music. The emotional experiences persist even without the physical response. This suggests that goosebumps are not essential for emotion, not a necessary part of the experience. However, some individuals report that something is missing. The physical sensation of goosebumps, they say, was part of how they knew they were having a significant experience. Without it, emotional moments feel somehow flatter, less vivid, less real. The goosebumps were a kind of confirmation, a physical marker of emotional significance. This variation in how people experience the loss of goosebumps suggests that the response plays different roles for different people. For some, it is a minor byproduct, easily dispensed with. For others, it is an important part of emotional experience, something whose absence is felt keenly. Let me now tell you about goosebumps across the human lifespan, about how the response changes as we age. Babies get goosebumps. Even newborns, just hours old, can produce the response when exposed to cold. This shows that the neural pathways for goosebumps are in place from birth, part of the basic equipment that every human is born with. Children continue to get goosebumps throughout childhood, responding to cold and fear and, as they develop the capacity for more complex emotions, to music and beauty and awe. The response seems to be fairly stable throughout childhood and adolescence, neither increasing nor decreasing dramatically. As adults age, the goosebump response may change. Some research suggests that older adults experience fewer emotional goosebumps than younger adults, perhaps because the emotional systems that trigger the response become less reactive with age. However, the response to cold seems to remain intact, suggesting that the physical mechanism is preserved even if the emotional triggering is reduced. In very old age, the skin changes in ways that may affect goosebumps. Hair follicles may be lost, the erector pili muscles may weaken, and the skin may become less responsive overall. These changes could reduce the visibility and intensity of goosebumps, even if the underlying neural signals are still being sent. The lifespan trajectory of goosebumps is not well studied, and much remains unknown about how the response changes as we age. This is an area where more research could shed light on both goosebumps and the broader question of how our bodies change over time. Let me tell you about goosebumps and temperature perception, about the relationship between feeling cold and producing goosebumps. Goosebumps are strongly associated with cold, but the relationship is not as simple as it might seem. You can feel cold without getting goosebumps, and you can get goosebumps without feeling particularly cold. The goosebump response to cold is triggered not by absolute temperature but by changes in temperature. A sudden chill, a drop from warm to cold, is more likely to trigger goosebumps than sustained cold. Your body responds to the change, the signal that something in the environment has shifted, more than to the temperature itself. This makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. A sudden change in temperature might signal something important, a shift in weather, a draft from an opening, a change in your environment that deserves attention. Sustained cold, by contrast, is something you might need to adapt to rather than respond to immediately. The threshold for cold-triggered goosebumps varies between individuals and can vary for the same individual depending on circumstances. If you are already cold, you may be more sensitive to further temperature drops. If you're distracted or emotionally aroused, you may be less likely to notice cold and less likely to get goosebumps from it. There is also a psychological component to cold perception. If you expect to be cold, you may feel colder than you otherwise would. If you see goosebumps on your skin, you may feel colder because you interpret the goosebumps as a sign of cold. This feedback loop can intensify the experience, making cold and goosebumps reinforce each other. Let me now tell you about the future of goosebumps, about how this response might change as humans continue to evolve and as technology transforms our lives. Evolutionary changes happen slowly, over thousands of generations. Goosebumps have persisted for millions of years, and they are unlikely to disappear in the near future. The muscles and neural pathways that produce them are harmless. There is no selective pressure to eliminate them. Humans 1,000 years from now will probably still get goosebumps. However, culture and technology can change the context in which goosebumps occur. As we develop better climate control, we may experience fewer cold-triggered goosebumps. As we develop new forms of entertainment and art, we may experience emotional goosebumps in new ways. The response itself may not change, but the circumstances that trigger it may shift. Some futurists have speculated about technologies that could directly trigger or suppress goosebumps. Devices that stimulate the sympathetic nervous system could produce goosebumps on demand. Devices that block sympathetic signals could prevent goosebumps entirely. These technologies could have applications in entertainment, therapy, or simple curiosity. Virtual reality and other immersive technologies may become particularly effective at triggering emotional goosebumps. By creating convincing simulations of awe-inspiring experiences, these technologies could produce goosebumps more reliably than traditional media. The goosebump response could become a measure of how immersive and effective a virtual experience is. Whatever changes come, Goosebumps will remain a link to our evolutionary past. Even if we spend our lives in climate-controlled environments and virtual worlds, we will still carry the erector pili muscles, the neural pathways, the capacity to respond to cold and fear and beauty with the ancient response of raising our hair. We will still be the descendants of furry creatures, even if we have forgotten what it was like to have fur. The night deepens around you now, and it is time to draw this exploration to a close. You have learned about goosebumps tonight, about the tiny muscles that produce them, about the evolutionary history that explains them, about the emotional connections that make them mysterious. You have learned about your body, about the vestiges it carries, about the ancient systems that still operate beneath your skin. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps you can feel your skin, the vast organ that covers you, with its millions of hair follicles and its capacity for this strange response. Right now, your erector pili muscles are probably relaxed, your skin smooth, your hairs lying flat. But they are ready, always ready, to respond to whatever triggers might come. Perhaps tonight you will dream, and in your dream you will experience something that gives you goosebumps. Perhaps you will dream of cold, of fear, of beauty, of something that moves you deeply. In your dream, your body may respond, your hairs may rise, your skin may prickle with a familiar sensation, or perhaps you will sleep smoothly, without dreams, your body resting, your goosebump response dormant until morning. Either way, the capacity is there, part of what makes you human, part of what connects you to your ancestors, and to everyone else who has ever felt their skin prickle in response to the world. Sleep now, creature capable of goosebumps. Sleep now, descendant of the furry ancestors. Sleep now, you who can be moved to physical sensation by cold and fear and beauty and awe. The night is quiet and your skin is calm and your erector pili muscles rest along with the rest of you. Tomorrow you will wake and the world will offer new experiences, new cold mornings, new fears, new moments of beauty. Your body will respond as it has evolved to respond, with goosebumps and sweating and all the other automatic reactions that make you a living creature. But stay a while longer, for the night is patient, and there is more to share about this remarkable response that connects you to your past and to your fellow humans. Let me tell you about some of the most common experiences that trigger goosebumps, the moments that reliably produce this response across different people and cultures. The national anthem is a powerful goosebump trigger for many people. Standing in a crowd, hand over heart, hearing the familiar melody, people often report goosebumps spreading across their skin. This response combines several triggering elements: the music itself, with its sweeping melody and emotional associations, the social context, with the sense of shared experience and national belonging, and the ritual nature of the moment, with its predictable structure and emotional significance. Wedding ceremonies frequently produce goosebumps, particularly at key moments like the exchange of vows or the first kiss as a married couple. Witnesses to weddings, not just the participants, often experience goosebumps. The emotional intensity of the moment, the significance of the commitment being made, and the sense of witnessing something sacred all contribute to the response. Graduation ceremonies, with their music, their rituals, and their marking of transition from one stage of life to another, are another common trigger. The graduate walking across the stage may feel goosebumps as they receive their diploma. The parents watching may feel goosebumps as they see their child achieve this milestone. The shared emotion of the moment spreads through the audience. Reunions, particularly after long separations, can trigger intense goosebumps. Seeing someone you love after years apart, embracing them, feeling the reality of their presence after so much absence, this can produce a physical response that marks the significance of the moment. The goosebumps say, without words, that this moment matters. These common triggers share several features. They involve emotional intensity, a sense of significance, and often a social or ritual context. They are moments when we step out of ordinary life and into something meaningful, when the usual flow of experience is interrupted by something that demands attention. The goosebumps mark these moments, distinguishing them from the background of everyday experience. Let me tell you about the relationship between goosebumps and memory in more detail, about how this response connects to the stories we tell about our lives. The moments that give us goosebumps tend to become memories. We remember them, we tell stories about them, we incorporate them into our sense of who we are. The wedding where you cried so hard you got goosebumps, the concert that gave you chills, the moment you saw something so beautiful you felt it in your body. These become part of your autobiography, part of the narrative of your life. This connection between goosebumps and memory is probably not coincidental. The same systems that produce goosebumps, the sympathetic nervous system and its associated hormones, also play a role in memory consolidation. Emotionally arousing events are better remembered than neutral events, and goosebumps are a marker of emotional arousal. Some researchers have suggested that goosebumps might have evolved partly as a memory marker, a physical signal that an event is significant and should be remembered. If you're being attacked by a predator and you survive, you need to remember the experience so you can avoid similar situations in the future. The fear response, including goosebumps, might help encode the memory deeply. This would explain why goosebumps feel meaningful, why they seem to mark moments as significant. They are a signal, both to yourself and potentially to others, that something important is happening. They are a flag planted in the stream of experience, saying, "This matters, remember this." Let me tell you about the differences between people in how they experience goosebumps, about the variation that exists in this seemingly universal response. Not everyone experiences goosebumps with the same frequency or intensity. Some people report getting goosebumps several times a day, triggered by a wide range of stimuli. Others report getting them rarely, perhaps only in response to extreme cold. This variation is real and documented, though we do not fully understand what causes it. Personality plays a role. As I mentioned earlier, people who score high on openness to experience, one of the big 5 personality traits, are more likely to report frequent emotional goosebumps. Openness is associated with appreciation for art and beauty, curiosity about new experiences, and emotional depth. People with these traits seem to have more responsive emotional systems that are more easily triggered to produce goosebumps. Genetics may also play a role, though this is less well studied. Some research suggests that the tendency to experience emotional goosebumps runs in families, suggesting a genetic component. However, it is difficult to disentangle genetic from environmental factors, since families share both genes and upbringing. Cultural factors may influence how people experience and interpret goosebumps. In some cultures, goosebumps might be seen as a sign of spiritual presence or supernatural experience. In others, they might be seen as a purely physical response with no particular meaning. These cultural interpretations could affect how likely people are to notice and report goosebumps. The triggers for goosebumps also vary between individuals. Music that gives one person intense chills may leave another person unmoved. This variation in triggers is partly about personal taste and associations, what music means to you based on your history and preferences. A song that is deeply meaningful to you because of its associations may produce goosebumps that the same song would not produce in someone without those associations. Let me tell you about the relationship between goosebumps and spirituality, about how this physical response has been connected to religious and transcendent experiences. Many religious and spiritual traditions have noted the experience of physical chills or goosebumps during significant moments. These experiences are often interpreted as signs of divine presence, of the sacred breaking through into ordinary experience. The body's response is taken as evidence that something real and important is happening. In Pentecostal and charismatic Christian traditions, physical manifestations during worship, including goosebumps, are often seen as signs of the Holy Spirit's presence. The experience of being physically affected by the divine is valued and sought after. Worship services may be designed to produce these experiences using music and preaching that reliably trigger emotional and physical responses. In Hindu traditions, the experience of goosebumps during meditation or devotion is sometimes called romanchana or pulakam, and is considered a sign of deep spiritual experience. The Bhakti tradition, which emphasizes emotional devotion to the divine, particularly values these physical manifestations of spiritual feeling. In various indigenous traditions around the world, physical sensations during rituals are taken as signs of connection to the spirit world, to ancestors, or to the sacred dimension of existence. Goosebumps, along with other physical responses, mark the transition from ordinary to sacred space and time. From a scientific perspective, these spiritual goosebumps are the same physical response as any other goosebumps, produced by the same muscles and triggered by the same neural pathways. The experience of being in the presence of the divine, whatever its ultimate nature, activates the emotional systems that produce goosebumps. But this scientific explanation does not necessarily diminish the spiritual significance that people find in these experiences, the body's response can be seen as a sign that something meaningful is happening, regardless of one's beliefs about the ultimate nature of that meaning. The goosebumps mark the moment as significant, and what that significance means is a matter for each individual to interpret. Let me tell you about attempts to measure and quantify goosebumps, about the science of turning a subjective experience into objective data. Measuring goosebumps is challenging because the response is subtle and transient. The bumps are small, lasting only seconds, and may be difficult to see or detect. Researchers have developed various methods to overcome these challenges. Visual inspection is the simplest method. A researcher watches the subject's skin and notes when goosebumps appear. This method is simple but subjective, depending on the researcher's judgment about what counts as goosebumps. Photography can provide a more objective record. By photographing the skin at regular intervals, researchers can document the appearance of goosebumps and review the images later. This method works well for visible goosebumps but may miss subtle responses. Specialized sensors can detect the changes in skin texture that accompany goosebumps. These sensors measure the roughness or conductivity of the skin, providing a continuous objective measure of the response. This method can detect goosebumps that are too subtle to see, providing a more sensitive measure. Self-report is another common method. Subjects simply report when they experience goosebumps, typically by pressing a button or indicating the intensity of the response on a scale. This method captures the subjective experience, but depends on the subject's awareness and willingness to report accurately. Brain imaging can reveal the neural activity associated with goosebumps, even if the peripheral response is not directly measured. By scanning subjects' brains while they listen to music or experience other triggers, researchers can see which brain regions are active during goosebump experiences. Each of these methods has strengths and weaknesses, and researchers often combine multiple methods to get a complete picture. The science of goosebumps is still developing, and better measurement methods may emerge as technology advances. Let me tell you about some unusual cases of goosebumps, the edge cases and anomalies that reveal the complexity of this response. Phantom goosebumps occur when people feel the sensation of goosebumps without the actual physical response. The skin does not rise into bumps, but the person feels as if it is. This dissociation between sensation and physical reality suggests that the perception of goosebumps involves brain processing beyond simply detecting the skin changes. Continuous goosebumps, or persistent piloerection, is a rare condition where goosebumps persist for extended periods rather than fading after a few seconds. This can be a symptom of various medical conditions, including neurological disorders, hormone imbalances, and certain medications. It can also occur during prolonged emotional experiences. Unilateral goosebumps, occurring on one side of the body but not the other, are unusual but documented. This asymmetry suggests that the neural pathways controlling the response may differ between the two sides of the body, or that there are local factors affecting the response in different areas. Goosebumps triggered by unusual stimuli have been reported. Some people get goosebumps from watching ASMR videos, from certain tactile sensations, from mathematical proofs or logical arguments, or from other triggers not typically associated with the response. These unusual triggers suggest that the goosebump response can be connected to a wide range of experiences, not just the classic triggers of cold, fear, and emotional music. Some people report being able to trigger goosebumps voluntarily, without any external stimulus. These individuals seem to have unusual control over their autonomic nervous system, able to activate the response at will. This ability is rare but has been documented in scientific studies. Let me tell you about goosebumps in other contexts, the ways this response appears in situations beyond the obvious triggers. Exercise can trigger goosebumps, particularly at the beginning of physical activity when the body's warming up. The sudden increase in circulation and the activation of the sympathetic nervous system can produce piloerection as part of the body's response to exertion. Sexual arousal can include goosebumps as part of the complex physical response. The sympathetic activation that accompanies arousal can trigger the same response that fear or cold would produce. Goosebumps during intimate moments are common and reflect the emotional intensity of the experience. Extreme fatigue can produce goosebumps as the body's systems become dysregulated. When you are exhausted, your autonomic nervous system may not function normally, and goosebumps may occur without the usual triggers. Certain foods, particularly spicy foods, can trigger goosebumps. The capsaicin in hot peppers activates temperature receptors in the mouth, and this can sometimes produce a body-wide response including goosebumps. The sensation of heat from spicy food, though it is not actual heat, can trigger thermoregulatory responses. Urination can sometimes trigger goosebumps, a phenomenon sometimes called pea shivers. This occurs because the act of urination stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which can then trigger a rebound sympathetic response, including piloerection. This phenomenon is more common in some people than others. Let me now discuss the question of whether goosebumps serve any current function in humans, or whether they are purely vestigial. The classic view is that goosebumps are vestigial, a leftover response from our furry ancestors that no longer serves any function. According to this view, the response persists simply because there is no evolutionary pressure to eliminate it. It does no harm, so it has not been selected against. However, some researchers have proposed that goosebumps may still serve functions that we have not fully appreciated. One proposal is that goosebumps play a role in regulating hair follicles and skin health. The contraction of the erector pili muscles may help to exercise the follicles, maintaining their health and function. The movement may help to distribute oils across the skin, keeping it lubricated and healthy. These effects, if real, would be subtle, but could provide enough benefit to maintain the response. Another proposal is that goosebumps serve a social signaling function. When you get goosebumps, others can see them on your skin. This visibility might communicate your emotional state, showing that you are cold, frightened, or moved. This social signaling could help in cooperation and coordination, allowing others to understand your experience and respond appropriately. A third proposal is that goosebumps serve an attention function, drawing your awareness to your body and to the experience that triggered the response. The sensation of goosebumps is noticeable, hard to ignore. It might serve to ensure that you pay attention to whatever caused the response, whether that is a drop in temperature, a threat, or an emotionally significant experience. These proposals are speculative, and none has strong empirical support. The question of whether goosebumps serve any current function remains open. It is possible that they are purely vestigial, or it is possible that they serve subtle functions that we have not yet discovered. Let me tell you about goosebumps in the context of the broader category of vestigial responses. The many ways our bodies reveal our evolutionary past. The human body is full of vestiges, features that made sense for our ancestors but serve little or no function today. Understanding these vestiges helps us understand our evolutionary history and the ways that evolution shapes bodies over time. The startle response is another vestigial response related to the fight or flight system. When you're startled by a loud noise, you jump, your heart races and your muscles tense. This response would have been useful for escaping sudden predator attacks, but today it mostly just makes you spill your coffee when someone slams a door. The fight or flight response itself is often excessive in modern life. Our ancestors faced real physical dangers that required physical responses, fighting or fleeing. Today, most of our stresses are psychological, not physical, but our bodies still produce the same physical response, complete with racing heart, sweaty palms, and yes, goosebumps. The reflex to clench your fists when angry or frightened is a vestige of the times when such situations were likely to involve physical combat. The anger that makes you want to punch something is the same anger that would have helped your ancestors fight off threats. Today, punching is rarely an appropriate response, but the physical readiness persists. Blushing, which I mentioned earlier, may be a vestige of dominance displays. In many animals, blood flow to the face and other body parts signals emotional state during social interactions. Human blushing may be a remnant of these displays, persisting because it plays a role in social communication and signaling. All of these responses, including goosebumps, remind us that our bodies were shaped by conditions very different from those we live in today. We carry the marks of our evolutionary past, the responses and reflexes that helped our ancestors survive but may no longer serve as well. Let me now tell you about the sensation of goosebumps in more phenomenological detail, about what it is actually like to experience this response. The first sign of goosebumps is often a tingling or prickling sensation, a feeling that something is happening on your skin. This sensation typically begins in one area, often the arms or the back of the neck, and spreads outward. As the sensation spreads, you may become aware of your skin changing texture. The smoothness gives way to roughness as the tiny bumps rise across the surface. The hairs on your skin may feel like they are standing up, though with fine human body hair this sensation is subtle. There is often a feeling of tightness or pulling, as the erector pili muscles contract and pull on the skin. This feeling is slight but noticeable, a sense that your skin is being tugged in a million tiny directions. The sensation is accompanied by a feeling of coldness, even when goosebumps are triggered by emotion rather than temperature. This is partly because the raised hairs increase air circulation over the skin, which does produce a cooling effect. But it is also partly a perceptual phenomenon, where the brain interprets goosebumps as a sign of cold and produces the sensation accordingly. The emotional colouring of the sensation depends entirely on context. Cold-triggered goosebumps feel unpleasant, a signal to seek warmth. Fear-triggered goosebumps feel alarming, part of a broader state of threat response. Emotional goosebumps from music or beauty often feel pleasurable, a physical manifestation of being deeply moved. The sensation is transient, typically lasting only a few seconds to a few minutes. As the muscles relax and the hairs return to their resting position, the bumps fade and the skin returns to its normal texture. The sensation subsides, leaving only the memory of what triggered it. Let me tell you about the words we use to describe goosebumps and related experiences, about the language of this physical response. English has several terms for goosebumps, including goosebumps, gooseflesh, goose pimples, and the more technical piloerection. The goose metaphors come from the resemblance to plucked poultry skin. These terms are primarily used in American English, while British English also uses the term goosebumps, but may also use phrases like the shivers or the creeps. The phrase "sent shivers down my spine" or "sent chills down my spine" describes a related experience, the sensation of a cold wave running down the back, often accompanied by goosebumps. This phrase emphasizes the wave-like spread of the sensation and its connection to the spine, where important nerves run. The word frisson, borrowed from French, refers specifically to emotional goosebumps, the chills produced by aesthetic or emotional experiences. This word captures the pleasurable quality of emotional goosebumps, distinguishing them from the unpleasant goosebumps of cold. In other languages, the terms often involve comparisons to bird skin, reflecting the same visual resemblance that English captures. But some languages use different metaphors. The Japanese torihada literally means bird skin, but carries connotations of fear or disgust as well as cold. The Hebrew tzamoret evokes the image of a porcupine's bristles standing up. The metaphorical uses of goosebump language are revealing. We say something gave me goosebumps to mean that something affected us deeply. We describe experiences as chilling or spine-tingling to convey their emotional impact. The physical response has become a metaphor for emotional intensity, a shorthand for being moved. The night has grown very deep now, and it is time to bring this exploration to its close. You have learned much about goosebumps tonight. You have learned about the erector pili muscles, the tiny structures that produce the response. You have learned about the evolutionary history that explains why these muscles exist, and why their response is now largely vestigial. You have learned about the emotional dimension of goosebumps, the mysterious connection between physical response and aesthetic experience. You have learned that you are connected to your furry ancestors through this response, that your body still tries to raise fur that is no longer there. You have learned that you are connected to other humans through this response, that everyone shares the capacity for this experience. You have learned that there is still much unknown, still questions that science cannot yet answer. As you lie here in the darkness, your body is at rest. Your erector pili muscles are relaxed, your skin is smooth, your system is in a state of calm. The triggers that would produce goosebumps, the cold, the fear, the beauty, are absent or muted. Your body rests in equilibrium, but the capacity is there. It is always there, ready to respond, ready to produce those tiny bumps at a moment's notice. If a chill entered the room, your body would respond. If a frightening noise broke the silence, your body would respond. If music began to play, music that moved you, your body would respond. This readiness is part of being alive. It is part of having a body that is connected to the world, that responds to changes in the environment, that carries the marks of millions of years of evolution. Your goosebumps are a link in a chain that stretches back to the first mammals, the first creatures with hair and the muscles to control it. But let the night hold you just a while longer, for there is one more thread to follow in this story of your body's ancient response. Let me tell you about the relationship between goosebumps and the human experience of time, about how this response connects us to moments that stand out from the ordinary flow of experience. Time, in our subjective experience, does not flow evenly. Some moments seem to stretch, filled with significance and detail, while others pass in a blur hardly noticed. The moments that give us goosebumps are often the moments that seem to stand still, the moments that feel more real and more present than ordinary time. This is not coincidental. The same arousal system that produces goosebumps also affects our perception of time. When the sympathetic nervous system is activated, our attention sharpens, our senses become more acute, and we perceive more detail in each moment. This increased perception makes time seem to slow down, makes moments seem to last longer than they objectively do. This is why the moment when you hear a piece of music that gives you goosebumps seems to stretch, why you can remember it in such detail afterward. The goosebumps are a marker of heightened arousal, and heightened arousal produces heightened perception and heightened memory. The moment is expanded, both in experience and in recollection. This connection between goosebumps and the experience of time is another reason why the response feels meaningful. Goosebumps mark the moments that matter, the moments that stand out from the flow, the moments that we will remember. They are a bodily acknowledgement that this moment is different, that this moment is special. Let me tell you about some specific pieces of music that are known to produce goosebumps, the songs and compositions that reliably trigger this response in many people. Samuel Barber's Adagio for Strings is one of the most frequently cited goosebump-inducing pieces of classical music. Its slow build, its emotional intensity, its sweeping strings that seem to reach for something beyond themselves, all of these contribute to its power to produce physical chills. The piece has been used in films and at memorials, its emotional impact well established. The final movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, with its Ode to Joy, frequently produces goosebumps, particularly when the choir enters. The build-up through the earlier movements, the tension and struggle, all resolve into this explosion of joy that has moved listeners for 2 centuries. In popular music, many songs have become known for their goosebump-inducing qualities. Hallelujah, in its various versions with its blend of sacred and secular, its rising chorus, its complex emotional tone, reliably produces chills. Amazing Grace, especially when sung by a powerful voice or a massed choir, triggers the response with its combination of familiar melody and profound lyrics. The themes from certain films, forever associated with their visual and emotional contexts, can produce goosebumps through pure association. The theme from Schindler's List, with its solo violin and its connection to the Holocaust tragedy depicted in the film, moves many listeners to physical response. The themes from Star Wars, from E.T., from countless other films, carry emotional weight that can trigger goosebumps in those who know and love the films. These pieces share certain musical features that seem to contribute to their power. They build intensity over time. They use dynamics and texture to create emotional arcs. They balance tension and resolution in satisfying ways. But beyond these technical features, they have something harder to define. An emotional authenticity or depth that touches people in ways that merely well-crafted music does not. Let me tell you about the individual variation in musical goosebumps, about how different people respond to different music. Your goosebump triggers are not the same as anyone else's. The music that gives you chills may leave others cold, and the music that moves them may not move you. This individual variation is one of the most interesting aspects of the phenomenon. Part of this variation comes from musical training and familiarity. People who have studied music may respond to different features than people who have not. They may notice harmonic subtleties or structural nuances that contribute to their emotional response, or they may be more analytical and less emotionally open, reducing their goosebump response. Part of the variation comes from personal associations. A song that played at a significant moment in your life, your wedding, a memorial, a moment of triumph or tragedy, may trigger goosebumps every time you hear it, purely through the power of memory. The same song, heard by someone without those associations, may produce no response at all. Cultural familiarity plays a role as well. Music from your own culture, using scales and rhythms that feel natural to you, may be more likely to trigger goosebumps than music from unfamiliar traditions. The emotional conventions of music vary across cultures, and what sounds moving in one culture may sound strange or neutral in another. Mood and context affect the response as well. You may be more susceptible to musical goosebumps when you're already in an emotional state, when you are listening attentively rather than using music as background, when you're in a social context that amplifies the emotional impact. These sources of variation make goosebumps deeply personal. Your goosebump response is a signature of your emotional life, your memories, your cultural background, your individual sensitivity. It is a window into who you are, revealed through your body's response to sound. Let me tell you about goosebumps in the context of human rituals, about how this response has been incorporated into the ceremonies that mark important moments in human life. Humans are ritual creatures. We mark births and deaths, marriages and graduations, transitions and transformations with ceremonies that have predictable structures and emotional arcs. These rituals often include elements designed to produce emotional responses, including goosebumps. Funeral rites often include music that is chosen for its emotional power, for its ability to produce the feelings of grief and transcendence that the ritual is meant to evoke. The slow hymns, the mournful melodies, the collective singing of familiar songs, all of these can trigger goosebumps in the mourners, marking the moment as significant and the loss as real. Wedding ceremonies are designed to produce emotional peaks, moments when the significance of the commitment being made becomes viscerally felt. The processional music, the exchange of vows, the first kiss as a married couple, all of these are moments when goosebumps commonly occur, both for the participants and for the witnesses. Religious ceremonies of many traditions incorporate elements that produce goosebumps. The chanting of prayers, the singing of hymns, the collective movement and response of a congregation, all of these can trigger the response. The goosebumps become part of the spiritual experience, a bodily confirmation of the sacred nature of the moment. Graduation ceremonies, military ceremonies, national commemorations, all of these use music and ritual to produce emotional responses. The playing of the national anthem, the presenting of colours, the recitation of oaths and pledges, these ritualized moments are designed to evoke feelings of connection, pride, and significance, often accompanied by goosebumps. The incorporation of goosebump-producing elements into rituals is not accidental. Rituals work, in part, by producing shared emotional experiences that bind participants together and mark moments as significant. Goosebumps are a visible, felt sign that the ritual is working, that the emotional impact is real. They are part of how rituals achieve their effects. Let me tell you about the absence of goosebumps, about what it is like for people who rarely or never experience this response. For most people, goosebumps are a regular part of life, experienced in response to cold, fear, emotion, or some combination of these. But some people report rarely or never experiencing goosebumps, at least not from emotional triggers. For these individuals, the descriptions of musical chills and aesthetic frisson may be puzzling, describing an experience they do not share. People who do not experience emotional goosebumps do not seem to be emotionally impaired. They still feel emotions, still respond to music, still can be moved by beauty and tragedy. They simply do not have the particular physical response that others describe. The emotion is there, the goosebumps are not. This dissociation between emotional experience and physical response is interesting from a scientific perspective. It suggests that goosebumps are not essential for emotion, not a necessary part of being moved. They are one possible accompaniment to emotional experience, but not the only one. Some researchers have suggested that people who do not experience emotional goosebumps may process music and emotion differently in their brains. Brain imaging studies have shown that people who experience musical chills show different patterns of activity than those who do not. The difference seems to involve connections between emotional and auditory processing areas, suggesting that goosebumps depend on particular neural pathways that are more developed in some people than others. For people who do not experience emotional goosebumps, descriptions of the phenomenon can seem mysterious. What is it like to have your skin respond to music? What is it like to feel physically touched by sound? These questions may have no satisfying answer for someone who has never experienced it, just as descriptions of colour cannot fully convey the experience to someone who cannot see. Let me tell you about goosebumps in the lives of musicians and artists, about how creators relate to this response in their audiences and in themselves. Musicians often describe the experience of goosebumps as a goal of their art. They want to move their audiences, and goosebumps are a visible sign of success. The performer who sees goosebumps spreading across the arms of audience members knows that they have achieved something, that their music has touched people in a physical way. Some musicians describe using their own goosebumps as a guide during practice and performance. If a passage gives them goosebumps, they know it is working. If it does not, they may adjust their interpretation until it does. Their own bodily response becomes a tool for shaping their art. Composers have studied the elements that produce goosebumps, trying to understand and intentionally incorporate them into their music. The sudden shift to a new key, the unexpected entry of a voice, the crescendo that builds to a powerful climax, these are techniques that composers use to create goosebump moments. The understanding is partly intuitive and partly analytical, a blend of art and craft. The relationship between artists and their audience's goosebumps is intimate and strange. The artist creates something, sends it out into the world, and it returns as a physical response in the bodies of strangers. The goosebumps are a communication, a bodily acknowledgement from audience to artist that the art has worked. This silent conversation, happening without words, is part of what makes art meaningful. Let me tell you about the future of Goosebumps research, about the questions that scientists hope to answer in the coming years. The neuroscience of emotional goosebumps is still not fully understood. What exactly happens in the brain when music produces this response? What neural pathways are involved, and how do they connect auditory processing to autonomic response? Brain imaging studies are beginning to answer these questions, but much remains unknown. The genetics of goosebump susceptibility is another area for future research. Why do some people experience emotional goosebumps frequently, while others rarely or never do? Are there specific genes that influence this variation? Understanding the genetics could shed light on the underlying biology and could help explain individual differences in emotional and aesthetic experience. The relationship between goosebumps and other emotional and physical responses is worth exploring. How do goosebumps relate to tears, to laughter, to other bodily expressions of emotion? Are there common pathways, shared mechanisms, or is each response independent? Understanding these relationships could provide a more complete picture of how emotions manifest in the body. The potential applications of goosebump research are also being explored. Could measuring goosebumps provide a way to assess emotional engagement with music, film, or other media? Could goosebump responses be used in therapy to identify emotionally significant material? Could understanding goosebumps help artists create more moving work? These applied questions motivate some of the ongoing research. Let me offer some final reflections as this long night draws to a close. Goosebumps are small things. They are tiny bumps on the skin, produced by microscopic muscles, lasting only seconds. In the grand scheme of things, they might seem insignificant, a minor curiosity, a footnote in the story of human biology. But goosebumps connect us to our past. They are a vestige of a time when we were different creatures, covered in fur, living in a world where raising that fur could mean survival. When you get goosebumps, you're experiencing a response that your ancestors experienced, using muscles that they used, feeling a sensation that they felt. You're linked to them across millions of years. Goosebumps connect us to each other. Every human being has the same basic capacity for this response. When you get goosebumps at a concert and notice that the person next to you is also getting them, you are sharing an experience, a moment of bodily synchrony. Goosebumps are one of the many ways that our bodies reveal our common humanity. Goosebumps connect us to the mystery of our own experience. Why do we feel physical chills when we hear beautiful music? Why does our body respond to something as abstract as sound, as intangible as melody? These questions touch on the deepest puzzles of human experience, the relationship between body and mind, between sensation and meaning. And goosebumps connect us to the present moment. When you feel your skin prickling, your hairs rising, your body responding to something in the world, you are pulled into the now. You cannot get goosebumps about the past or the future. You can only get them about what is happening right now. They are an anchor to the present, a bodily insistence that this moment matters. Sleep now and let all of this settle into you. Let the knowledge rest. Let the questions remain open. Let the mystery be comfortable rather than troubling. Tomorrow you will return to the world, and your body will respond as it responds. You will feel cold and get goosebumps. You will feel fear and get goosebumps. Perhaps you will hear music that moves you, and your skin will prickle with the ancient response. And perhaps, for just a moment, you will remember this night. You will remember learning about the erector pili muscles, about the evolutionary history, about the mysterious connection between physical response and emotional experience. You will remember that your body carries the marks of its past, that your responses connect you to ancestors and to fellow humans, that even the smallest sensation has a story behind it. But linger just a moment more, for there are final whispers to share before sleep takes you completely. Let me tell you about the poetry of Goosebumps, about how this simple physical response has become a symbol for all that moves us in this world. When we say that something gave us goosebumps, we are saying more than just that our skin reacted. We are saying that we were touched, that we were moved, that something reached through the ordinary surface of our lives and stirred something deeper. The physical response has become a metaphor for the experience of being alive to beauty and meaning. Poets and writers have long used the imagery of goosebumps, chills, and shivers to describe moments of profound experience. The chill down the spine when confronting the sublime, the prickle of the skin when encountering the sacred, the shiver that runs through the body when touched by beauty. These descriptions capture something that transcends the merely physical. There is wisdom in this metaphorical use. The body knows things that the mind cannot articulate. When your skin responds to something, it is telling you that something matters, even if you cannot say why. The goosebumps are a form of knowledge, a bodily wisdom that complements and sometimes exceeds intellectual understanding. This is why artists trust the goosebump response. When a musician plays a passage and feels goosebumps, they know something is right, even if they cannot explain what. When a writer reads back their work and feels chills, they know they have touched something true. The body becomes a guide, a teacher, a source of insight that the rational mind alone cannot provide. Let me tell you about the relationship between goosebumps and the experience of meaning, about how this physical response connects to our deepest sense of what matters. The moments that give us goosebumps are often the moments that feel most meaningful. They are the moments when we feel connected to something larger than ourselves, when we sense that there is significance in the world beyond our individual concerns. The wedding, the funeral, the concert, the sunrise, the moment of reunion or farewell. These are the moments that goosebumps mark as meaningful. Some philosophers have suggested that the experience of meaning is itself a kind of emotional response. Not something we reason our way to, but something we feel. If this is right, then goosebumps may be one of the bodily expressions of the experience of meaning, a physical signal that we are in the presence of something that matters. The loss of goosebump capacity might thus be more than just the loss of a physical response. It might be connected to the ability to feel meaning, to be moved by significance, to experience the world as more than just facts and events. This is speculative, but it suggests that goosebumps may be more important than we usually assume. Let me tell you about the mystery that remains, about the questions that this night's exploration has not fully answered. Why do we get goosebumps from music? We have explored theories, but none fully explains the phenomenon. The connection between sound waves, emotional processing, and the contraction of tiny muscles in the skin remains partly mysterious. How does a pattern of air pressure vibrations produce a physical response in the skin? The chain of causation involves many steps, and not all of them are fully understood. Why do some moments produce goosebumps, and others do not? We can identify some of the features that make goosebumps more likely: crescendos, unexpected harmonies, emotional significance. But we cannot predict with certainty which experiences will produce the response in which people. There is an element of unpredictability, of individual variation, that our current understanding cannot fully account for. What is the ultimate function of emotional goosebumps, if any? We have considered the possibility that they are purely vestigial, a response that once served a purpose but no longer does. We have considered the possibility that they serve subtle functions we do not yet understand. The question remains open. These mysteries are part of what makes goosebumps interesting. If we understood everything about them, if the response were fully explained and completely predictable, some of its fascination would be lost. The mystery is part of the wonder, the sense that there is more to this simple phenomenon than meets the eye. Let me leave you with a final image as you drift towards sleep. Imagine your ancestors, millions of years ago, sitting around a fire on a cool night. The temperature drops and their fur rises, trapping air close to their bodies, keeping them warm. They do not know why this happens. They simply experience it as part of being alive, part of having a body in a world of changing temperatures. Now imagine yourself, lying here tonight, a descendant of those ancestors separated by millions of years but connected by the same response. Your ancestors' fur is gone, but the muscles remain, still ready to contract, still responsive to the same triggers. You are linked to them across the vast expanse of time, linked by the tiny structures in your skin that still do what they were designed to do, even though the fur they were designed to raise is no longer there. This connection is real. It is written in your body, in the erector pili muscles that you inherited from your parents, who inherited them from their parents, all the way back to the first mammals who had hair and the muscles to control it. Your goosebumps are a thread that connects you to the deep past, a living link to ancestors who lived in a world you can barely imagine. And this connection is beautiful. It is a reminder that you are part of something larger than yourself, part of a lineage that stretches back millions of years and will continue into the future. Your body carries the history of life on Earth, and goosebumps are one small sign of that vast heritage. Tomorrow you will wake, and your body will be ready. Ready to respond to cold, to fear, to beauty. Ready to produce those tiny bumps that link you to your ancestors and to your fellow humans. Ready to mark the moments that matter with this small but significant response. The stars that shine tonight are the same stars that shone over your ancestors when they huddled around fires, their fur rising against the cold. Those ancestors looked up at the same patterns of light, felt the same sensation of goosebumps spreading across their bodies, experienced the same automatic response that you experience today. Across all that time, through all those generations, the responses persisted. The genes that code for the erector pili muscles have been passed down, copied and transmitted from parent to child, surviving through ice ages and migrations, through the rise and fall of species, through the transformation of naked apes into the builders of civilizations. You are the current carrier of this inheritance. Your goosebumps are the goosebumps of your ancestors. The same response, the same muscles, the same neural pathways. When your skin prickles in response to cold or fear or beauty, you're experiencing what countless beings before you have experienced, all the way back to the beginning. This is the gift of evolution, this connection across time. You're not alone in your body. You carry within you the traces of all who came before, the adaptations they developed, the responses they evolved. Your goosebumps are one small part of this inheritance, one thread in the vast tapestry of life. Tomorrow the world will be full of triggers, cold mornings, moments of fear, music on the radio, a scene in a film, a passage in a book. Your body will be ready, always ready, to respond with that ancient reflex, those tiny muscles contracting, those tiny bumps rising on your skin, and when that happens, perhaps you will remember. Perhaps you will remember that this response has a story, that it connects you to your past, that it marks the moments that matter. Perhaps you will pause for just a moment to appreciate the strange wonder of having a body that responds to the world in this way. Or perhaps you will not think about it at all. Perhaps the goosebumps will come and go, unnoticed, unremarked, just another part of being alive. That is fine too. The body does its work whether we notice or not. The erector pili muscles will contract when they are triggered, and the skin will rise into bumps, and the ancient response will continue, as it has continued for millions of years. Sleep now, rest now, dream now. The goosebumps will keep. Good night.